All right, it is 5:30. We're gonna kick off the facilities meeting. Starting right off, we have a quorum. The only absence is Brooke, who let me know that she would not be here. Does anyone have any additions or adjustments to the agenda? Next agenda, approved minutes of December 19th, 2024.
So moved.
Second. Melvin and Eric.
Yep.
Sorry, Ben. Anyone have any comments or questions? All in favor? Easy catch.
Here's some extensions.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Abstentions. Next is going to be audience with the public. Is there anyone who wanted to speak tonight? Okay. All right, there are no action items, so we'll move right on to the list, starting with bus route cancellations.
Good evening, everybody. Before I get started, we do have some folks here from the Transportation Department. Starting from our left to right, we have Marisol Robbins, who drives in Washington, Matt Simmons, who drives in Waldoboro, and he is also our in-house bus driver trainer. He's been very busy on that. And Tanya McGray on the far right, who is one of our van drivers. And she also is a McKinney-Vento liaison, works with Nancy Stover on that. So they are here, and certainly at some point, oh, and there's Sarah Davis, who's joining us, or those of you who do not remember, has started as my assistant, and we'll see how long that lasts before she gets tired. I wanted to just talk a little bit about bus route cancellations. Obviously, we continue to have challenges with bus routes, and this time of year, people are getting sick and is having an effect. We do have one sub driver that graduated from Max class, Chris Moody. He went through the class under the understanding that he was primarily wanted to handle sports trips, but would then backfill on other trips if the bus driver was out where he could, if there was enough advance notice, things like that. I'm getting some pushback from parents, and they seem to gloss over my messages where I offer them van rides on every time that we cancel a trip. I have 3 vans that are standing by to help out on any day. That's for both trips in the morning and both trips in the afternoon. And so, as I shared with one parent, I don't think it's a blemish on us if they choose not to take advantage of a van ride, just because they typically ride a bus. And we will continue to work hard to meet our transportation requirements. As we get down here a little bit further, a couple of blocks down, I'll talk a little bit about personnel when we stand there, where we're potentially looking as we start preparing for FY 25 and 26. But I just didn't know if anybody had any questions on how we handle those on bus cancellations.
We get notifications, or your parents swear, or any of those things?
That's how I do my notifications whenever there's a bus route canceled. And that notification can be anywhere from several days in advance if we know that somebody is going to be out in advance. We have had, I don't know that we've had any same morning of cancellations. We've had a couple of afternoon, like you noticed, afternoon cancellations, but for the most part, our morning cancellations, we've been able to do a notification cycle. It's a challenge, and I understand. I understand the impact on the students and on the parents, and we are striving to meet the transportation needs as much as possible.
But we'll get some that refuse a van ride.
Oh, yeah.
Because they had a bus ride, but the bus is not running, so they can't ride in the van.
Correct.
One month, we're offering them a ride.
Yes.
seems to me that they got property, not us.
Yeah, I don't consider that. I think that we are definitely putting our best foot forward on this as much as possible. You know, I empty our maintenance department, I get AJ on it. We have our mechanics on the road, I'm on the road. And I try to have 3 vans available in the instance, which for a high school that can transport about 6 kids, you know, 5 comfortably, but 6 in a pinch. The elementary, depending on their age and how many car seats and booster seats there are. And if there's somebody who's 12, sit in the front seat, then it's anywhere from 4, 5, 6, something along that lines, depending on the right age group. Or, you know, 4 if you're not hitting the right age group, just for space purposes.
As a parent, I get the level. I think they're very well written. I think that somebody's probably not reading. They see cancellation and they instantly, they're probably not seeing the, it actually says, we will provide van service for anybody needing a ride. Please contact me before 6 a.m. tomorrow if there's needs transportation. I mean, your number's there. I think they're doing all you can do. And it's well done.
Pending any further questions, I'll continue on down the list. So good news, we had our new one portion of our water treatment system at Padoff Valley High School has been replaced, is up and running. And we have only had one instance where we have lost water at the high school since the replacement because of use or we were using it probably almost daily at lunchtime. So we're definitely seeing much less frequency, and the new treatment system is certainly keeping that far better. If and when we get to the point where we add the arsenic treatment to the existing system, we'll see how that goes. I think that I've spoken to you a little bit about enlarging our storage tank if we can get more space for it. But overall, I'm pretty happy. This upcoming Monday, we have the paint games at the high school, so that'll be a pretty good test. Because that's a well attended event. So I think that'll be a pretty good stress test on the water system to see how well that it'll be able to handle a heavy load. Pending questions? So for personnel, good news up front. We had an opening at the Northern Valley High School that we offered pending CHRC approval. We hired an individual to fill that position. So that'll bring us back up to 100% on the facility side of the house. On the bus, on the transportation side of the house, I anticipate going into next year that we are going to be potentially down 3 drivers, 2 of them being route drivers and 1 of them handles the MCST runs. That's the downside. The very upside, though, is that Mr. Simmons over here has been extremely busy with training. He has 2 candidates right now that are have submitted to get their permit. And once that gets back, they will then obviously start the road and lead them on to get them towards their license, and potentially, what do you think, back by June, if all goes well, they would be licensed? Okay. Yeah. And we have 1 confirmed individual who's ready to start up on the training as soon as possible, and to try to, so that Matt's not getting too inundated, we want to get these 2 that are currently in the cycle, get them permitted and move on to the road testing. And then we'll bring the next individual on board. Pardon me. And there are also 2 individuals, a father-son from Union, that contacted me yesterday that has shown some interest in potentially doing it. And I'm just waiting for that to come back. I think of those, Matt, 1, the short Steve, is looking to drive full-time, is that correct? And then the other gentleman who will be starting, coming out the next one in the phase, he is interested in driving full-time as well. So, I mean, it's knock on wood. Obviously, there's a long way between wanting to have your bus license and then actually finishing it. There's been more than a couple of people that have gone through the training and realized that, it wasn't for them. And so, but with any luck, we'll be in fairly decent shape. We won't at least be severely behind the eight ball. That's not counting any unforeseen circumstances that come about, which obviously can at any moment.
Can you just speak a little bit to how long the process takes?
So for classroom time, it's about 40 hours. And then once we get done with that, they fill out the CDL application, mail it into the state. Usually within 3 weeks, they'll have a paperback in the mail with a date on it. They have to take their test and DMV to get their permit. Usually about a couple weeks after they receive that back in the mail. And then it's from there 15, 20 hours of driving time, depending on how strong they are behind the wheel. As soon as I feel that they're comfortable, they can send in to get a date back to take their road test. So it also depends on the state health, but I mean, sometimes they're quick getting that set back, other times they're more than 3 or 4 weeks out. So it kind of just depends on the state.
I want to make sure we're on it. It's not a quick process.
No.
It takes a long time.
And Matt, in the 40 hours of training, you have to spread that out over weeks because of your other commitments. because
Yeah, I
of
mean,
driving
they
and
can't
stuff.
do it in between runs, or weekends, or it kind of depends on their availability versus how much we do at one
All right, thank you. Any questions on personnel? All right. Redistricting, I know that this is, has been talked about a little bit. From my perspective, from a facilities perspective, if we're not doing an addition onto a building, or if we're not doing any major infrastructure upgrades inside of the building to support this, then there's not a whole lot of impact to facilities. We might have to get a couple extra lunch tables for a school, depending on which one it is, and we'll probably have to move some classroom desks around a little bit. But from a facility standpoint, I don't see a significant impact. I would say that from a transportation perspective, that there are some very significant impacts that could happen depending on which choices that we go. And I certainly would like to be a part of, at least a part, speaking on behalf of the transportation piece. And certainly would likely bring in a couple of the smart bus drivers as we start connecting this thing down to specific areas on the best way that we could potentially do rerouting the buses, or something along those lines.
I think a big piece of deciding to do this would be streamline transportation. We wouldn't want to make it more difficult, for sure.
It's gonna be difficult, but there's really only a couple of options that I see that come with a minimal impact to transportation. And that's me thinking about it. I certainly want to run it by a couple of people that are a lot smarter than I am on that before I voice it. But I do have a couple of suggestions that once I get a little bit more clarity, that I think that I might forward.
So I will, not barring, if you are just tuning into this meeting or are just getting here, we had some previous discussion in the finance committee about options and how to go about the space problems we're having in a couple other buildings. And kind of the thoughts coming out of that was seeing if, starting here at the facilities committee, seeing if we can meet more often rather than maybe doing an ad hoc committee or something like that, to get together and try and figure out something for this. And I'll certainly get in contact with Brian and Karen to see what's logistically possible as far as meeting, if meeting more often is a possibility or something like that, so we can
figure out a form to do that. And looping in bus drivers as well as building administrators and really nailing down something for next year. Is there any questions on that? As we're rolling into the cycle for 25, 26, just wanted to get a little bit of guidance on what the goal is for me. Obviously, we do have some capital improvements that we would like to get done. I also realize that we're trying to, I'm assuming that there is a goal to keep the budget as flat as possible. The one big question that I have is thoughts on was the extra $1 million that was added to the budget this past year when we had the, I can't think of the official title of that event at high school. The public, thank you, the public referendum. And if the intent, if you think that that will continue to stay in my budget, or if I should expect to lose some of that. Because that money, frankly, is a pretty good seedbed to which we could pay down on loans for other projects going on in the district. If that is going to happen, or a portion of it, that gives me a little bit of, that gives me a concept to start planning on as I move forward, as far as what we should be looking at, or what I should be looking at for my spending budget on capital improvements. And I don't necessarily need an answer to that, obviously, but that is something I would like as a guidance on before we get into the, before I'm presenting the budget. So I have the idea.
Tell you my personal opinions.
Okay.
On that, I would love to see it be used towards, debt service for capital improvement stuff. And so stay kind of in your, I guess debt service is a different article, but the intent would be for you to spend it to take out loans to do what you need, and then that would be the payments, you know. I think that would work out well.
I think we can make I think we can get a lot done using having that, if that stays in my budget, and obviously keep a little bit behind to address any emergency that comes up. But I think that we can certainly leverage that to get some good work done.
I like the idea of keeping, as you call it, the seedbed. It's a good analogy. If, just to ask the question, if you were going to be able to give up any, but still keep enough behind to be able to really leverage it well, what do you think that number looks like? Like, I don't want to say how small of a seedbed can you work with,
Right.
but I'm just curious.
So a couple of caveats. Obviously, we had hey boss, please help me out again with the other $1 million that
Capital reserve.
capital reserve fund. I don't know if that will continue to be financed. Obviously, I've got that pretty well earmarked for this summer to expend that. Obviously, we'll make do with what we can, no question about it. I mean, you tell me what I have, and that's what we'll be. I don't see my regular budget increasing significantly. Obviously, we have contracted services that will have some natural increases. On the facility side, fuel is always a variable, so we probably won't lower that much. We probably won't raise it much. That'll probably hold pretty steady. Salaries and benefits are obviously something that I can't impact one way or the other. The one thing that we are going to probably need to look at on the transportation side is potentially another van driver position, I think. I mean, obviously I'd like to have more bus driver positions as well. Not trying to fill those, but I do think that I can fill another van driver position. Specifically, we have a van driver that is earmarked for, well, it's in district transportation, if that's what it's doing, but it's providing transportation for the light students. Up to Union Elementary School, and which is perfectly fine. I mean, that's what our responsibility is. The challenge that we have is that their schedule runs different than ours, than our shoot 40s. They run on Camden schedule, Karen? Is that
Camden students run on a Camden schedule and our students, yeah, it's a little mixture.
It's a little mixture. So that makes it such that the driver doing that isn't necessarily available for the elementary run, and some of the other stuff. So it just makes it, that position, they get a few hours, but we can't really maximize the position.
What's the difference in the schedule? I'm curious. But Camden schedule versus ours.
They drop off is at 8.
Or you say 30, no?
So right in the middle of the elementary.
Okay.
Will that be adjusted to RSU 40 time now that the staff is
Said that, yeah, because the teachers now are, they're not Camden. You can certainly take a look at that.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
That would make a huge
It
difference.
sure would.
So we could adjust the programs to our schedule.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was a Camden teacher and then that was our teacher now.
I think with that adjustment, we can certainly probably continue with the personnel that we've got.
Another possibility within Brian's budget is, we have a student that is, I believe the correct Casey, correct me if I'm aging out of their program, which we've transported for many years, with a private contractor. So potentially, and again, with a caveat, there's not a new student that needs transportation, we can perhaps use that money for a van driver, in district versus, to transport. So we may be able to save there.
This is the time of year when things start, when the vans, we were in pretty good shape right up through coming out of Christmas break is when it started getting pretty thick. I've got a mechanic who is driving. He and I are splitting the run. He drives in the morning and I drive in the afternoon. I've got one of my maintenance guys who was filling in pretty steadily. So, I mean, we're certainly making it work and we will continue to make it work. It would work better. Like any place would, right? It would work better. And we would be keeping people in the positions that we're paying them to do, with another van driver potentially. And clearly Till thinks you got there, what are the, I'm not sure which. I'm guessing it's he. So capital improvements, I wanted to give you all an update. And obviously last time we had Karen Norms here and we continue to work towards, our summer project, which would be centered, I expect right now will be centered at the high school campus. That would be likely a combination of the new septic field for the high school and a new boiler plant for the high school that would probably be moved out of, it'll be physically located outside of the high school, probably be a wood burning boiler, wood chip burning boiler, is what it's looking like right now. That's where we're getting the most rebates from Efficiency Maine. And there are also some locked in, moving forward yearly rebates that you get from doing that as well, when you get paid back for using that as your source of heat. We're still working that out, but what that will allow us to do is clear out the boiler room in the high school, which would allow us to then upgrade the water treatment system, give us a larger water container for the water that we have there, and that would fix any water issues that we at this point are aware of at the high school. And so that's what we've got going on as far as for the summer. We continue to look at an April vacation projects, plural, that is likely going to be a small upgrading valves and controls at Union Elementary School and what would be the back section of Union Elementary where we have our meetings formally at the central office, both top and bottom, and getting those on to digital controls, which would then put the majority, almost all of the school on digital controls, a lot better controls, much better as far as energy savings goes. We are looking at some two sound control or sound deafening projects. One at Miller School in their music room, which is just off from the gymnasium. It's on the stage and it's high ceilings, extremely loud. I think that we can, but I've had a couple of people that have come in that are at least smarter than me at this, which I don't know if that's high praise or not, but they are. And they think that there are we can make some traction with that for fairly reasonable money. And so we're looking at that. The other one that we are looking at is at Prescott School. And for those of you who remember that we had a ventilation system that was installed at Prescott back just prior to my arrival, as I understand, so 7-8 years ago. It's fairly intrusive, particularly the base unit that's inside one of the classrooms, and as well as the ductwork that runs down the hallway, and with some most likely, pardon me, with some insulation or something along that lines, that we could probably get that into a far more usable space for the Prescott staff with that. And then the final two things that we are looking at for that is some exterior lighting, upgrading some of our exterior lighting at both Friendship and Prescott. So those are the last two schools that we haven't done any significant upgrades on the exterior lighting since I've been with the district, at least. Now that's what we're looking at right now. I certainly have the money in my budget right now. I'm looking at probably like in the $250,000 range for our April projects, somewhere in that range. And we have that available to do that without drawing my budget down to the point where I would be unable to respond to any of the emergencies.
Does anyone have any other questions for Brian?
Ben, I just wanted to ask I don't know if I caught your answer to Noah's question about what you felt a comfortable minimum sort of seedbed would be. I may have missed it.
I would guess that I would have to defer till our next meeting to answer that, or at least perhaps do correspondence later on. I'd like to sit down with Karen and see what the going rates are on loans and seeing how much money it takes to get us where that would get us at what each level. But I can absolutely have that information for you. Certainly, if not by the next facilities, even at the next full board meeting, we should be able to work that out. Thanks. So
I was just looking at my kiddos at Miller, and she has noise canceling headphones for music class. Real loud in there.
it certainly is.
They will really appreciate that project.
Pending any questions, I did want to address the Warren Community School fire suppression system mishap that we had this weekend as we talked about emerging issues. That's not necessarily an issue, but I know that Karen and Steve released a message out to the board giving you a heads up. So at Warren Community School, there are two parts to the fire suppression system. There is one that's considered a dry system. That's all running up an unheated space. So there is no water to the sprinkler heads. It's all sits back, and then you release a valve and the system immediately floods. The other half of the system is a wet system. So you've got water right to the sprinkler heads. That sprinkler head goes off, you've got instant water. Given the booster motors that we have on the water and the dry system, it floods very quickly. Seconds is what we're looking at there. On Friday evening at some point, and I will explain why I say at some point here as we go through this, the compressor that runs the pneumatic valves that close off the pipes that feed the dry side of the system, that compressor, the belt split and compressor stopped, and then at that point, depending on, I'm not sure how long it took to degrade down pressure in the system to the point where the valves released. But that's what happened. We were notified about 10, I got my first notification from Seacoast Security around 10 o'clock, which is kind of a generic message. We have fire trouble, something along that lines. To be totally honest with you, I get those quite often because it could just be a blip. It could be nothing more than the telephone line is communicating properly when it checks in. So I get those quite often. Initially didn't think a great deal about it. My next phone call about a half hour later was from Greg Andrews, who's the chief of the fire department for Warren Community, for Warren. Obviously at that point I realized we were dealing with a little bit more serious situation. The good news is on this that the system performed the way it was supposed to, in that the sprinkler heads themselves never released the water. The system charged, but no water entered into the building, which is what we like to see. And we were able to get high tech after we secured the building, make sure there were no issues. I contacted High Tech, the company who handles our fire suppression system, midnight, 1 o'clock, they're on call guy, and he said, well, before you drain the system off, why don't you leave it trickling just so the water, because there are low spots in the hoses that run through for your fire suppression that I did not know about. And so they have to go through, and they've got a map of those areas. You go through and you drain those low spots out that won't naturally gravity flow, won't feed gravity wise. And so we left water going throughout the night. He got there, it was about 9, 10 o'clock that morning. By that point, I had called around and we found some belts for it. And so he started resetting the system, working on low points, and I went and got a couple of belts for the compressor. And we had it all back up and operational. I think that I called Steve and Karen. It was early afternoon that the system had been tested. The Warren Fire Department had been notified. We brought the system back online from Seacoast Security. So certainly it's not what we want to do. We don't want it to happen, because obviously anytime you call on a company or emergency service call, it's going to be pricey. But the good news is the system performed the way it was supposed to. So that is a little bit of good news in this whole system, in this whole situation.
Could have a big flood.
Yeah, it could have been just exactly what happened in Booth Bay, we were here a couple of years ago, when the pipes froze, and set it off and did significant damage, absolutely. And not just there, a lot of places that have had these problems before, where they actually flooded the buildings.
Do we
So
know why the valve failed, and do we anticipate this being a
we don't, because the belt was actually flipped right upside down. It was the condition that we found it in. So the belt's kind of it's a notch. It's kind of like a V almost with a flat top, and the belt was flipped right around. So we don't have any idea how it happened. It was still on on the rollers, and so nothing had come loose. So we don't know the answer to that.
we don't
but-
anticipate having to replace any part of that system?
Not at this point. We're probably we found there's a couple of little pinhole leaks in the system that are not uncommon. And so we're searching those out, and we will fix those as we do. But it's not an impact to the operation of the system right now. And that, pending any questions, that's all that I have for you.
Anyone have any other questions for Brian? It is 6:05. We are adjourned.
Right.